All right. Well, let's get the CFF TOC meeting for March 2nd, 2022 underway. We've got generally the regular topics plus a couple others. We'll look over our actions from last week, which I don't think we had very many of. Review outstanding PRs. I think we have some updates on the CF on Kate's effort naming. I added a topic to discuss some of the process and mechanics for adding and removing repos from working group scope, because I noticed we have a bunch of PRs to that, and I feel like I had some expectations about the clearance needed for those, but we should talk about it as a group. And then, of course, any other business. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and review actions from last week. We had a general one for people on the TOC to suggest ownership of the orphaned repos on the spreadsheet that Chris had sent out about a week or so ago. I know I had taken a pass through them before that. Chris, do you feel like you have enough info on those, or are there other outstanding ones that you think need attention?
I mean, there's a lot of fairly big lift there from various people. The platform working group already went through, and they're going to go ahead and put in a pull request to bring in all the ones that they're claiming, which is a good chunk. And I pinged the foundational infrastructure and app runtime interfaces working groups too. And with just the ones that we think go to those, that's like 80% of these. I didn't go ahead, and there's a few that could go to other working groups, and I haven't gotten around to pinging those folks yet. But figured once we get some movement on those three major working groups that have a ton of those, we can go down and pick up the edge cases and reach out to the other ones where there's just a couple.
Great, sounds good. All right, well, that's it in terms of action items we listed from last week. Should we go ahead and look through the outstanding PRs? I divided these into ones that have come in the past week or so that I don't think we've looked at. And then I went through and listed a number that are still outstanding that I think the has input on. But we'll go through the new ones first, and then we can cover the previous outstanding ones. The first one is adding someone as a contributor to the FI working group. I think on this one, let me make sure I have it pulled up myself. In general, I think this falls under the scope of one of the RFCs, where we said working groups can just say they want to add someone that they think should be a contributor based on some level of contribution, because that's just granting them membership status in the community. So I think actually this is something that really just the working group needs approval on. But in terms of the process for this, are we now in a place where we can just add them to the big cloudfoundry.yaml file, and the automation will at some point make them a member of the GitHub org?
I think that is a process. So at least I used it, I don't know, 2 weeks ago or something like that, to add a few of the colleagues to some groups, because if you don't do it, then everything gets overwritten again.
Oh, right. Okay. So they get synced out if you do it through the GitHub UI. Okay, great.
And that applies also for teams that are not officially listed in the charter documents. So everything in the Cloud Foundry org, that's how I understood the process.
Great, makes sense. Okay, well, we can leave that to the FI working group to decide.
I think the underlying discussion here is what are exactly the rules. I mean, there's something written in the community repo that at least seems to be difficult to be applied. We had the concerns by Amelia, and formally this one needs to be rejected, right?
Yeah,
which is probably not correct. So I don't know if we should maybe rephrase the rules a bit here, or to make them more vague, or I don't know, because if let's say the workgroup lead says, I want to have this colleague as a committer, then this is a rather strong statement, I would say.
Well, I guess Ruben, actually, thanks for joining. You filed this. You just wanted to add him to the GitHub org, right? You weren't making him an approver for an area in the FI working group. Yeah, so it's contributor, not approver.
Okay, yeah. Then everything is fine, right? I misunderstood it. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like the idea is to eventually make that person an approver, but we're not there yet.
Right. Yeah. You just want to add him to the GitHub org, so he gets in the door.
That's exciting. Ruben, does he have a vendor affiliation? It's neat to see a person I'd never heard of working on the Azure CPI, which I've worked on before.
Yeah, no, so yeah, I had a call with him on Zoom. He works for, I don't remember the company, but they are using Bosch to build a whole DevOps platform. So they are doing nothing CF or anything related. So they are doing Bosch stuff and they are heavily committed on Bosch. They are even working on a RHEL stem cell. They are adding back Red Hat support. Yeah, there's lots of stuff upcoming. It's nice, right? To have more eyes on Bosch. People that are concerned with where Bosch is going. I don't know. It's good.
That is something that we owe clarification on to somebody doing that. Like VMware has customers also doing this. And I'm like, okay, well, we're building Bosch for the stuff that we're building here in the Cloud Foundry Foundation. And like, I'm not sure we can say we're building Bosch as a generic deployment tool that will work for lots of other cases. This is your arena, Ruben. I think like if we
I'm like they are using a lot of the releases in the community and stuff, right? So they have been doing this for a long time, apparently, but they're stepping up to do more work.
Yeah, I'm just saying there's tension between Bosch is a tool to deploy the stuff that we built so far, mostly Cloud Foundry. And Bosch is the next generation multi-cloud deployment tool that can be used for anything. And those are like two different mission statements for Bosch. And just speaking personally, we've gone back and forth about those two mission statements a lot, about like, are we really going to push Bosch as a product? And this is also a Chris question about like, do you evangelize Bosch? Do you sell Bosch when you're out talking to developer advocacy around? Like, or do you glance over Bosch and say, Bosch is this really cool multi-cloud deployment tool that we use to deploy Cloud Foundry, right? It's two different product positionings. And Ruben, you own this area. This would be like, you should think about how you want to position Bosch, and Chris should think about how he suggests we position Bosch, and so on, right?
I mean, he's got the shirt on, so there's your answer.
Yeah, but underneath it is a Cloud Foundry shirt, you know it.
High hard, yeah.
No, you put the Cloud Foundry shirt over that.
I mean, with the RHEL thing, right? We had a discussion of like basically, yeah, we can take a pull request to bring it back into the Bosch Linux stem cell builder, but we're not going to put it on Bosch IO, right? So that was the outcome there. I think that would be a fair compromise.
Well, sure, but that's actually a different question, which is like, should we support other operating systems to deploy Cloud Foundry? But which maybe isn't actually the question they're asking because they want to use it to deploy other things. But that's one question, which could still be within the realm of Bosch as a tool to deploy Cloud Foundry versus Bosch as a generic deployment tool that competes with Terraform and should be used to, I mean, like it's not exactly a match for Terraform, but it's like the same idea of like, it's generic, it can deploy anything. It's a standalone product that I guess, Chris, you would think about it as a project. You don't position it as a project when you're anymore, right, Bosch, when you're thinking about?
Well, I mean, it was its own PMC, right? And right now, under the Linux Foundation, it is like the Bosch PMC is listed as a project. Now we're updating all of that stuff to correlate with the new working groups, but that hasn't happened yet. So from a technical point of view, it was a project. But I mean, it's been some years now that where, it hasn't really seemed like there was enough critical mass around Bosch outside of being the reference deployment for Cloud Foundry, right? Some people champion Bosch a lot, right? Dr. Nick, various folks, And there's probably less momentum there now than there was a couple of years ago, and a couple of years ago it was kind of seen that there wasn't quite enough momentum there. So I don't think we're going to start pivoting and really pushing BOSH at this point, although lots of people do see real value in it. It's a fine piece of technology for what it does, but yeah, I mean, yeah.
We even use BOSH to help stand up the initial Kubernetes environment that you need, right? So it's used for other purposes. So
yeah,
right. It's a question of how do you reason about its roadmap, right? Like, how much time is the community who maintains BOSH going to spend thinking through and supporting use cases that are not in service of deploying the finite set of things that we are already deploying with BOSH, right? Including Kubernetes, Kubo release, and so on, and Cloud Foundry release and a few others for sure. That's the thing that we should clarify for anybody who's considering getting invested in it around a new set of use cases, right? Because it's not that they can't contribute and try to help support those use cases. It's like, how much support are they going to get from the owners of BOSH, from you, Ruben, and the people that know BOSH really well around these use cases that don't benefit, if there are use cases, right, that don't benefit the core Cloud Foundry deployment use case.
I don't feel like we have a lot of trouble there. I mean, people have been doing a lot of things around Cloud Foundry for a long time. So it feels like we have found or identified most of those use cases. So it's also not that this new contributor is coming with all sorts of new things. No, they're just saying it actually works great for us. We just have a customer that really needs RHEL, right? And that's why they're doing that. But they are totally fine with what BOSH does.
Yep, that's fine. It only, the rubber meets the road when they need major changes. This has come up before with MySQL, right? Where MySQL's folks who have been building MySQL releases are you really need to invest in massively better persistent disk management for minimizing the hot swap, right? Like the stuff we've done. And we're oh gosh, there's a ton of effort to try to figure out how to make BOSH support these use cases better, or really large disk support. There's use cases that don't turn out to come up very much. And so that's the kind of thing that I just want you to clarify in a roadmap conversation with those folks. They still might be oh, this is fine. We don't need a ton of support. And what we need basically falls into what BOSH already does. So there's not going to be a mismatch there. But this is why we have those roadmap conversations, so that people don't get all excited about I'm going to make BOSH do this new thing that isn't in line with where BOSH wants to go, as a project, right?
All right, so sounds like a good ongoing topic of discussion for the working group and the TOC, but nothing we're going to resolve right now. All right, well, that was PR number 1. When do we get to number 2? All right, that's 229. I'm dropping the link in. This is more in line with, I think, a series of PRs that we've been seeing, especially as we flush out this final cohort of unclaimed repos. So Jeff is requesting to add this logging route service sample app to the app runtime platform working group. So maybe this is actually a segue into the subsequent topic about the approvals that we need for adding repository scope to a working group. My thoughts on this have been that we generally need agreement between the working group leads and sign off from the TOC to add or remove a repo from the scope of a working group. But I think we've been ignoring some of these, maybe with the idea that that's only working group approval required. So I thought it'd be good for us to have a deliberate conversation about it.
I missed that was also the outcome of the previous PR. I see that it's now as a working group label. So basically, Bayan and I can just review it and merge.
Yeah, I think for adding a contributor who would just be a member of the GitHub org, that's what we decided in the RFC. But maybe we need an RFC that would clarify the general policy on adding ownership of a repository in a Cloud Foundry GitHub org to the scope of a working group. So David or Stephan, I mean, for that in general, does what I proposed, where we need to say, like, we need agreement from the work group leads, and we need like an approved decision from the TOC, just as an oversight layer to add that scope. Because my thought is, I don't think that we want to have, like, we leave it just entirely up to the working group, because then theoretically they could claim whatever or divest whatever without any oversight from the us as the body across the organization.
I like that. I like that, because you're like, some people are empire builders and some people are divestors, and like there's a bias there. And like if you match two of them up, they might successfully transfer the entire contents of the working group into the other working group without us noticing. So it does make sense to validate that that is within the scope of what we consider the definition of those groups.
Yeah, in general, I prefer to push down responsibility as far as possible. But yeah, the other thoughts are also valid. So
yeah, and I think
with the
generally
TOC
speaking, oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Stephan.
Yeah, I think we can start with your proposal that TOC should give a +1, and then if that doesn't work out, there comes now a big bunch of new repositories from this orphaned discussion. And if we are too slow, then maybe we can rethink.
Okay, sounds good. I'll put myself down for an action item to draft an RFC to spell out the details of that explicitly, because I think that's been maybe a little underspecified in our existing docs.
My experience, working groups aren't like really likely to take on more repositories than that are strictly like the things that they cannot really, like, okay, Bosch is in the name, okay, I cannot move this to someone else, right? With the 100 repos that we already have in the working group, I don't foresee us taking on more that stuff we don't own. But yeah, I mean, it's also all this discussion is happening on GitHub. It's all really transparent. It's easy to revert. So I don't know if too much process is needed, except for maybe the working group leads. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think this doesn't have to be like a week-long debate among the TOC members. This can just be something that we get a quorum of approval on before making the change to the charter document that specifies the scope for the working group. Okay, so with that in mind, I think this would be one for us to check on async, and also to make sure that Amelia, as the work group lead, is signed off on. And then I think there are a couple similar ones with 230 that would be adding the garden-dockerfiles. So garden scope, and another one to add the loggregator-tools repo to the runtime team. That one I even recognize from the orphaned sheet. Okay, well, it sounds like we've got a process to try it informally, where we as the TOC can take a look. So I'll see about tagging those out of band, and then we'll make sure that Amelia is also tagged on them to give a working group wide approval. Okay, well, those are the new PRs that have come in the past week or so, and then I had listed some of the, I think most of the outstanding ones that I think could have relevance. So we've got a few actually that we've been waiting to convert to the RFC format. The first of those is 170. This is the one about just the naming structure for GitHub teams and who should have access to them. So I think we hadn't been going through the kind of two-phase final comment period and then approval decision on this one at least. But it's something we had been discussing for a while, and I think we had general approval of. So if we have unanimous explicit approval from everyone on the TOC, then we could just accept it and then try out the script that Lee put together for the numbering. I think there's another one around project roadmap and visibility that maybe already has that unanimous approval that we could also try it out on. Yeah, Stephan, see, you approved it. David, you hadn't yet. Oh, go ahead, David.
Yeah, I just took a look and did.
Oh, great. Okay. All right. Well, we still need a sign off from Jan for that unanimous thing. If maybe we can try and get that over the next week or so. All right. The next one is 171. This was about a PR only workflow. This one might already have all the approvals. Let me pull it up myself. Yeah, this was another one we were waiting on the update to the RFC format.
Wait, what are we waiting for? Like the change to the.
No, we've got, it's now in the RFC format. I think we were just waiting on maybe unanimous approval from the TOC. Because again, we hadn't really done the final comment period process on this one either.
Right. So 4 out of 5 people, we won't name names, have reviewed and accepted this PR. So if we could get the 5th person, maybe in this case, to take a look at it. I think I'm okay with it. I was looking at it earlier, long ago, so I'll do a last check right now and then hit it.
Okay, sounds good. I think we're not going to try out the script live on this call to do the numbering. So if we get that in the next day or two, then that should be good. All right, the next one that's outstanding is 172. This was Ruben. This was yours about the stale bot and having it automate some of the triage of various states for issues. So I know Jan, I think, had some somewhat strong pushback about some of the timeframes on this. And I feel like I took another look at it. I was a little bit confused about how the subsequent discussion about the state flow on the issues
it's not
actually
there.
factored in. Okay.
Should be updated.
Okay.
Next.
Yeah. Well, if you get a chance to do that soon, that'd be great. And we'll take another look at it. Thank you. All right. And then the last of the previous cohort of RFCs that needed to get rewording was 173 about the project roadmap and visibility. And that has all of our approvals. So we should just bite the bullet and merge this thing in. I was a little wary of doing that last night when I was compiling this list, lest I totally trash that repo. If I get a chance, I'll do it later. If someone else wants to do it, then welcome to.
And I just approved the other one, Eric. So if you're doing it, you could do.
All right, 2 in a row. We'll see how it deals with concurrent. Is it idempotent and reentrant? Probably not.
Yeah, I recommend running it at the same time, ideally.
Okay, well, David, you do one and I'll do the other one, and then we'll see how badly they
Let's not talk to each other, and we'll just see what happens.
right, just concurrent activity. I'll also be on a train traveling at relativistic speeds, so that'll work out great. Okay, next one is, I think this is just a repo add one, 184. It does need to be adjusted so that it conforms to the YAML syntax, but I think that's something that any of us who have access to the community repo could do. on our own. Okay, so this just seems like one that the TOC needs a double check on, but it's got identity CI in the name, so it seems UAA related. Okay. All right. Any other thoughts on that one? Next on the list is 196, which again is just adding this policy client repo to the list of networking repos. Again, I think it needs an update to match the new format. The next repo or next pull request on the list is related, but I think it's actually affecting the community or the cloudfoundry.yaml org file, which is I think maybe getting to the other question about the mechanics of adding a repository to the scope of a working group. Is this also the change that we need to make to grant the actual leads and potentially approvers for the working group access to manage that repo? Well, instead of just saying, well, it's in your scope, but you don't have any permissions to do anything on it.
That's the idea.
Yeah,
We should
okay.
create a script that generates all these working group definitions, but then in the org file, and then
Right. Now that we have the YAML descriptions of the scope in those documents, we could just be generating this automatically and merging it or entirely replacing it.
Yeah, but that will be a really big change. And also, so probably ideally first, maybe just merging.
Yeah.
And then there will also be some discussion about like we want probably some additional things like bots or something in that YAML, because teams rely on bots. So yeah, that will be like a process, and I haven't. I don't know. We should be driving that maybe. We'll work on the PR for the automation bit, but
okay.
The unknowns there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm making a couple of notes on the section about the mechanics for adding and removing repos. Just so we don't forget that aspect of the process. So I'll just say, ideally, we would generate team permissions for repos from the charter docs.
I think that was also still blocked. Was that RFC about the naming of teams already merged and approved?
No, I think we're just waiting on the last couple of approvals. If that was 170, so it's not merged yet. I know Greg mentioned that some of the app runtime interfaces team names deviate from that pattern, so they'd have to just adjust them. But he didn't say that that should be a blocker.
Yeah, and I looked at like automating that, like generating those names based on the YAML files, and that's also gonna look different because the way the areas are named, like for example in the Bosch or foundation infrastructure working group area, we have like the some sort of name, and then between parentheses we have like Bosch, or like, so it's VM lifecycle something, and then between parentheses Bosch. But if you would use that as a team name, I mean, you get really long team names. So maybe you have like an alias or something, right? That you want to use.
Or like a short name or a slug or something.
Yeah, something like that. So we will have to do something there as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Okay. Well, sounds like good scope for future automation. Okay, well, I think we can move on. There's honestly a bunch of other, I think most of the rest of these are other requests to add repos to scope. So maybe we can just handle those on GitHub or keep working through them in accordance with the policy that we've proposed. I think the last one is really the one, Chris, you submitted last week about adding a contributing file and some other minor updates. So that's 225.
Right, yeah, and if people want to make edits to contributing, the other things are pretty straightforward.
Okay, yeah, I think I approved this. We generally have a quorum, so actually, I think since there haven't been any changes in the past week, we're good to merge this with Jan having had time to comment.
Cool.
Great.
Eric.
Yeah, I'll do it. Merged. All right.
Beautiful.
Got one thing done. All right. Well, I think those are all the outstanding PRs that are relevant. And I think we've covered enough discussion of the process and mechanics for adding and removing repos. But the other non-miscellaneous topic that I had added was any updates on naming for CF on Kates. Chris, I think there's some updates there.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully there'll be a big update in about 2 hours. The working group meeting is an hour after this meeting ends, and got feedback from the trademark folks at LF Legal, and so 2 of the top 3 names were shown to be problematic. One of them is shown to be wide open. So I've already shared that with the working group leads, and they're gonna, just run everything past the working group today at the meeting. So hopefully by the end of today's meeting, we will have a new name for the CF on Kates project. And then I'll trigger the trademark application stuff and we can start using it later this week.
Great, that's exciting news.
Yeah.
All right. Well, also we're taking a bye on the working group updates this week because Marcella is out sick. So, is there any other business?
Eric, I'd like to talk to you about the Stratos stuff at some point.
Oh yeah, sure. I saw your email over the weekend. I hadn't had a chance to reply yet. So
That's fine. I just want to. We are heading in the right direction. I just say it that way.
Great. Yeah, I think the people that are currently active in the community, myself included, might not have the most detailed view into Stratos because almost by definition at this point it's something that we haven't had a lot of experience or exposure with. But I can try and give you at least my context on the questions you raised, and might be useful even to circulate those or more broadly if you feel like you need more input.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to start with you first, and then move from there.
Awesome. Right. Sounds good. Happy to weigh in on what you asked about.
Okay. Great.
What's the summary there, Eric? Is there like vendor support historically for Stratos that's dried up? I know that people had always wanted to make their own UIs. Like the Foundation's original guidance was like, UIs, man, they got it. They're so branded. Everyone make your own, right?
Let's do yellow.
But what's happened to Stratos? What's the history there?
I believe this was primarily a project that came from SUSE and had some engagement from IBM, and those folks have all dropped off now.
Presumably, SAP folks have their own UI. We know we have our own UI.
Yeah.
Everyone. Yeah, that makes sense. Did Bluemix run it or something? Like I've used the Bluemix UI. Was it based on Stratos? Like I didn't.
Color yellow.
I don't think so. So I think actually maybe it was mainly SUSE that was invested in it as part of their offering. And they at some point offered it to the community and we accepted it, I think even as an extension project when that was the PMC structure.
And we have clients that use it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, Norma, I appreciate you looking into whether the Struck and Win folks can put any effort behind it, and I'll try and get you some answers to your questions soon.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I think that's a wrap. Thanks, everyone. Have a good week.
Same for you.
Thanks,
See
everyone.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good week.